things that's really important to think about when we start to have conversations around SMEs, or even adding in the M at the beginning, micro, small and medium enterprises, is that there has currently been a lot of money spent by governments, development agencies and others to try to address a whole bunch of social and environmental challenges that we're facing. And yet it is often very difficult to see the results of those programs. And so despite extensive money being spent and time and effort going into programs, we tend to have quite disconnected or siloed approaches where we take very complex things and we pump out a simplistic, short-term, and often academic response to a problem. And even the panel that we saw beforehand demonstrated that there is no shortage of great ideas, incredibly talented entrepreneurs and solutions out there to the problems we're facing. But it is a big expectation to think that individual entrepreneurs or SMEs are going to be able to navigate and find these disconnected programs and how they move from an idea through to being able to not only take on investment, but actually deliver on investment, so pay for that capital and deliver whatever their product or service is with consistency and quality. And so without the proper support and infrastructure, the business environment, and those connections to a market, rather than just a disconnected program that's focusing on pumping people through a program, numbers of people, without connecting it to a market. Without that, we actually risk really raising people's expectations, spending a lot of money, and yet just disappointing people, wasting their time and not actually solving the problems we said we were trying to deal with. So for Fusion, our approach is to focus on integrating a system that actually combines the need for financial and non-financial support for SMEs, because people need more than just access to capital. Money on its own does not solve all the problems that we have. For Jive, if we gave him a bunch of cash, that doesn't actually fill in all of the gaps in the business and his need for a business partner to continue to tweak his pricing so the model works. There is more to the problem than just capital. And so for us, it's about that integration of the financial and non-financial support for SMEs, and then putting that together in a coherent framework that actually understands the market and helps people navigate that. So very briefly, in terms of how this would work, because Fusion is trying to bring together an addressing of the SMEs' needs, as well as taking away some of those blockers that stop investors currently investing into SMEs. So for an SME wanting to be helped to navigate that system, there's a few ways that Fusion can help. The first is that we seek to do an initial triage or assessment of actually understanding where that business is at. And so a big component in that triage component is to understand the business model, where the gaps are, what you might need help with, and then the answer may not necessarily be Fusion, because we're not trying to be a solution for everything. But as I said before, that connecting of the dots and helping an SME or an entrepreneur navigate this system is incredibly difficult. And so being able to mentor and support people through that and possibly point them to maybe they need to participate in some of the programs the Women's Business Resource Centre is running. Maybe they should go to Kumul Game Changers. Possibly they could be a participant in Tech Lab or the ICT cluster. There may already be some programs that would suit their needs, but we can't assume that everybody has availability of that information. So helping navigate where they might go for help is part of triage. Then we have two bigger, chunkier programs. One, Investment Lab, which is focused specifically on getting an SME ready to take on investment. And so that can be everything from that business model, the business plan, how to actually do the market analysis, have a really clear narrative and pitch, and work through those questions that are more deeply the root cause of not being able to grow and build a sustainable SME. So not just saying we need money, but saying how much money do we need? What is that money for? That answering those two questions actually helps us understand what type of capital might be appropriate for you. And again, then the connecting of the dots is saying it may be that you need to go and talk to a local microfinance provider. It may be that actually by doing the investment readiness work, you could actually tick the boxes a bank needs and possibly debt finance is appropriate. Or if it is an equity piece you need, then we can connect you into the partnering funds that Fusion is setting up. And then the third part of our work with SMEs looks at governance. So there's a huge gap around the need for governance standards and reporting to be in place for SMEs to not only take on investment, but give investors confidence that they can deliver on that investment and pay back that capital and fulfil the promises that they have made. So this partnering approach is at the heart of everything Fusion's doing, because we don't want to come in and be a competitor to existing programs. It is about saying what is already here, how do we connect the dots of existing programs, but how do we also then step in and fill some of the gaps, like those areas I just outlined, where SMEs actually need help to support them through that process. Very quickly on the investor side, we have found very consistently that PNG, unlike a bunch of the other countries in the Pacific that we've worked in, there is actually a lot of liquidity here. There are investors looking to invest in Papua New Guinea, but that are struggling to find the opportunities that are at the standard that they require. And investors are telling us they lack the capacity and the mandate to actively manage an SME portfolio. So if you have a ton of SME investments, it's actually a big task to manage that fund and ensure that they are able to deliver and that reporting standards are upheld, etc. And so this is a big barrier for people to play because it's incredibly expensive to do that. So the way in which Fusion can play in that space is that by combining development funding that can pay for the pipeline development, the capacity building, and that support post-investment to actively manage the fund, we can reduce those costs and importantly reduce the risk that then allows private capital to be leveraged and to come into the SME space in ways that it couldn't previously. The other piece that's really important related to SMEs and investment capital is that across the board, whether it's government or investors, we tend to focus on the bigger opportunities, the big projects, whether that's infrastructure or resources. And yet if we actually look at the way in which those projects will succeed, big pieces of a puzzle don't make up the whole picture. It is the SMEs in people's supply chains. It is all of the smaller parts of the economy that actually are the massive contributors. So if you look at some of the international statistics, SMEs are producing 60% of total employment, 40% of GDP, and in terms of new jobs, it's 4 out of 5 jobs coming in the emerging markets from SMEs. This is not a niche little play, this is a big opportunity and will be a huge driver of the success of PNG's economy moving forward in ways that are currently being overlooked by a focus on the bigger end of town. And investors' minimums being sort of 30 to 50 million kina means we're missing all of the incredible activity down in that SME space.
So you've got some more detail on your second slide. Would you like to?
So just very briefly on this, the focus for Fusion is that our projections are that within the first 5 years of Fusion, we're aiming to unlock 175 million kina for SMEs here in Papua New Guinea. And there is a focus around 3 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So decent work and economic growth, SDG 8, industry, innovation and infrastructure, SDG 9, and gender equality, SDG 5. So for us, and part of the detail that can be seen in the logic model there that talks about the activities we do and how they drive up to the outcomes we're seeking to achieve, our focus isn't just about numbers of SMEs through a program or the total kina invested in SMEs. It's about saying how do we actually dive into the detail of how we would actually address these entrenched social and environmental problems that we're facing through providing a strong SME sector that can consistently receive that support and investment that it needs.